Good evening and welcome to everybody. Request all of you to mute yourself so that we don't have any disturbance. Good evening. My name is Shekar. I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. We have today's guest, Mr. Srinath Ravichandran. Srinath Ravichandran is a Wall Street trader turned aerospace engineer with over 10 years of experience in engineering, finance, and project management. He has a bachelor's degree from electrical engineering from College of Engineering, Guindy, master's degree in financial engineering from Columbia University, and aerospace engineering from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Srinath believes in using his multidisciplinary experience to solve large-scale problems that humanity faces today. He started Agnicool with the simple idea that going to space shouldn't be the hardest part of living in and working from space. So with that short introduction, I thought we can start the evening session. I believe we have about 30 to 40 minutes of the session, my session with Srinath, and maybe another 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A after that. Would request any members who joined in, if you have any questions as we go along, to basically to put in the chat box so that we can see what your questions are, and then we can take them as many as possible in the sequence that we can. So one disclaimer, I know Srinath for almost 5 years now. So it is not something new for me to know about Srinath, but nevertheless, I thought it's a great opportunity for me to interact with him to let you all know about a wonderful space entrepreneur. I'm sure none of us thought about space as a sector for private industry until about 2015, 2016. Even though ISRO has been working with a lot of private industries and very, very private industry friendly, the space sector was not open to private industries. We will be going through all these things. So without much further ado, I would start with asking Srinath a few questions so that you all get to know his profile and background a little bit, and then we'll get on to his startup, Agnicool Cosmos, how we went about it, and then what are the kinds of challenges that he faced, what are some of the things that are unique to his enterprise, and perhaps lead into what is ahead of us from Agnicool and for the space sector. So Srinath, I see that you actually have a lot more experience outside of engineering, which is in the financial domain. And I also see that you got your space degree only the last few years. That was not your first degree or in the master's when you went to the US. So tell me about, when did you start having the passion for space, and why did you make a switch from finance to space?
Sure, sir. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me here. So as Shekar sir said already, he knows a lot of the story. So probably this is for the others. Just a disclaimer out there. So getting to your question here, I think I grew up in a family of people who were all into engineering in one way or the other. My mom was a physics teacher. My aunt was a physics teacher. My granddad did something in, his BSc physics in his days. So I think some one way or the other, physics was always some level. There was some level of interest for that. I did one competition in 10th standard when I was I grew up in Chennai only, Mananagar. There was some competition that ISRO had about going to Mars. So just attended that and somehow got to the semi-final level there. I didn't crack it actually, didn't go to the finals. But that was also giving me a lot of interest. And I actually just generally grew up watching PSLV launches. So it has always been there. One thing is when I wanted to take an aerospace degree, it was a time in MIT, right? The first thing that people look at today in counseling in Tamil Nadu state, at least, is MIT.
Srinath,
Right?
I have to butt in for a second. My apologies, Shekar and Srinath. I had some starting trouble, not like your rocket, I guess. So I couldn't get into my video was not working, my audio was not working. But
Sorry.
I just wanted to welcome both of you on behalf of the IIT Alumni Center. And what I can make out is, despite extremely short notice, it's so gratifying to see so many people who have joined the webinar. So you must be really great at launching rockets. Like I said, I only know the rockets which my grandson launches, which barely does about 3 feet. But you're a great guy, and from what I can see, an extremely popular person. So also Shekar. So please accept my apologies and welcome once again on behalf of the IIT Alumni Center. Over to you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you so much. So yes, sir, I think from my childhood itself, I was always interested. Only thing is when I wanted to do a bachelor's degree, everyone discouraged me from it, saying I'll only get a government job in ISRO. So that may not be what I want to do. So I just took my next favorite thing, electrical engineering. And then there I did, a decent amount of studying in electrical. I actually liked that stuff and got into motor design in ABB Limited, right? The large, heavy electrical industry. And then that company at that time was doing a lot of stuff with services. They were not doing design. I went in thinking we should do design only and all that. So that is where I got a little disillusioned about engineering itself, started questioning a lot of my own choices. And people around me at that time, again, so this is the second time I'm doing that, right? People around me, what they were telling me to do. So at that time, everyone was doing something in finance. So I at least I think my close friends, everyone did MBA in finance. And I found this financial engineering program. Did that. Long story short, I realized after a few years in Wall Street that actually my heart is in engineering only. So fixed all the mistakes of the past by doing another aerospace degree and then finally landed in Agnikul. So it's very circuitous story, but honestly speaking, I should have just always been with aerospace, I think. It just took me a long time to have guts in my own belief and come. So hopefully it's now starting to work out. Let's see how this goes.
It's good that you took a route that was different, took a different path, but came back to where your heart was. What portions of the financial services industry, what experience of those are you able to use right now in your career or in your personal life or in your startup?
Brilliant question, sir. So actually, I worked on a trading floor, right? Like what you might have seen in movies. So the interesting thing about trading floors is that there is really always this mode of no time, right? There is no time for anything. There is no time for even going to the bathroom, literally speaking. Particularly if you're a junior in a trading floor, between 9 to 4, when the markets are open, everything is hard. There is no time. So you end up learning a lot of shortcuts to get answers. I remember like my boss, if he walks there and he asks me what's the P&L for the day, if I go to an Excel sheet to look at it, already my performance review that month is going to be bad. So all these small shortcuts, and it was not just me. I was just copying what others were doing in the team as well. So there were so many rules of thumb. Everything was a rule of thumb. No one actually went back to doing the real calculations, real modeling. So I actually still try to, use some of that even at Agnikul today. So I think it helped me cut through a lot of information. That part I definitely learned in finance. Also, this always just being pressed for time. I think literally my job started off like that in in New York, right? So in startup here, we are always promising deadlines to investors, to customers. So I think I'm a little more used to it thanks to my years in finance. I think those two things I can directly see translate here. The other not so spoken about thing, which I actually think is very useful, is I think I became really good at Excel. I can do a lot of things in Excel, and Excel is actually a very powerful tool. I think some of you here might, if you've used it for a while, you'll understand. So that is another thing I learned. That was on the hard skills part. But yeah, sir, that's the answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, most of us who use Excel use only 1% of the functionality that's there in general. I mean, only people who do extensive modeling, they actually use Excel to probably the full extreme.
Exactly.
I see that you actually, one way you got back into engineering or space is actually by being as part of this space cooperative that you say you are a co-founder.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So once I quit my job in New York and went to do this master's in Urbana-Champaign, I quickly realized that was literally in the middle of nowhere, and finance had taught me a lot about networking. You need to be talking to the right people. It's not enough to simply have the textbook knowledge. So I was actually feeling very left out in the middle of nowhere in the US. So I decided I should be around the SpaceX community, because that was when coming. They're so vibrant. There are so many startups were coming looking at SpaceX. So moved to LA. And in LA, I was doing a lot of evening courses, anything I could do to say that, I am also in aerospace now. From finance I was doing. So one of them was, so I met a couple of people there who were saying that they should bring this idea of doing large scale, space missions by, completely a different model, not by this private funded model. Not like because that was being expensive, and that was also spoken about a lot, right? SpaceX was bringing down costs by doing everything inside, because the existing corporations were charging a lot in the name of aerospace. So there was idea that floated around that we should do it like a cooperative, like how we have textile cooperatives here. Similar model we should operate for large scale space missions, because space is beyond boundaries, is beyond everything. It's a very idealistic approach to building something. So in fact, we went to the point of, this was 2016, 15 and 16. And that was when the crypto world was also just starting. So we actually were thinking of doing a token for space, a coin for space, just like Bitcoin, right? And then from there, actually trying to pool that money in to do large scale space missions and all that. But clearly not many people were buying anything of that. They didn't even understand how you could operate it, in that model. So that didn't go far in terms of what we were trying to do, but I learned a lot actually. I was explaining and pitching. That was my first real experience in pitching, and also an experience in getting like you take all this effort and you talk with so much passion, and then the person on the other side is like, "What did you just tell me? Like I didn't even understand what they're saying." When they have that look on their face, right? So I think I got that experience for the first time there. Again, it has helped me so much about Agnikul as well. But that is what Space Cooperative was about. It is about using a cooperative model to build out large scale space missions, because we wanted to move it away from the private end. So I was one of the people who was trying to create that crypto framework for it. What should that blockchain framework be? How can you tokenize it? And what should people be paying for the token and all of those things? So understood a little bit about that at that time.
That could be your next startup.
Agnikul itself is taking everything.
I know. So when you were doing your masters in Urbana-Champaign, but you were actually living out of LA?
Yes, sir. I moved. I converted that. I applied as a full-time thing, but then I quickly changed it to a part-time and online program. Okay. And I tied up with some local universities in LA. Los Angeles, because the labs, there were some projects, like particularly in propulsion, where you had to go to the lab and do like for wind tunnels and all that. So for that, I actually I partnered with a few local community colleges in the Southern California area. But mostly it was just online, me looking at whatever people are doing now for school and college. That's what I was doing. But now it seems much more normal. At that time, it was actually quite rare. So, but that's how I did it. because again, as I said, I wanted to be in LA, wanted to be around SpaceX. That was the only motivation.
So how was the SpaceX community? Can you give a little bit idea about, because I know SpaceX has been at this for almost about 10 years, I think now.
More than that,
And it was started with this guy who started Tesla,
Elon, yeah.
who was with PayPal earlier, and so I mean he invested in three, one of which was SpaceX, where he invested the maximum, I think. And so how is that model? I mean, how does that work in SpaceX, so that we can understand, is there anything parallel in India?
Yes, sir. So for SpaceX, actually, so when I remember my first meeting with someone in SpaceX, I was actually still very much in this mode of I'm an outsider, right? I am from finance. Will this community even take me? That was the mode I was in. So I was actually very nervous, and SpaceX already by then, by the time I had done that, it was 2016 or something. They had done their first landing of their first stage, right? So it was already a big talk. At least in the community, everyone was praising SpaceX for their brilliance in engineering and all that. So I was very nervous and spoke to them, and actually it turned out to be like they're also normal people. At least for me, it felt like that. But they're very clear about the vision. Everyone is aligned on the vision, and they are actually the guy I spoke to, right? He was actually leading something in the tanks manufacturing part. He was basically the guy who is designer of the liquid oxygen tank for them. And that guy had a diploma, that's it. He had a diploma in manufacturing, and he was a welding specialist. He had a diploma in welding, basically. So I was very surprised. I wanted to ask him, like, how did you get into SpaceX and all that? He said, I just applied, they called me, I did the interview. That's all. His story was like the most boring story. Okay, I applied, I got a call, I did the, whatever questions they asked, I answered. But then the more I spoke to, the more I understand that they didn't really have any of the usual conventional thresholds that maybe other larger corporations at that time were having, right? Education and experience, both were not necessary.
So there were not a lot of people from NASA in that.
At least the people I met, all of them had very different backgrounds. They were all, they were all like, they had masters and they just come. That's it. Everyone had some internship in some NASA. They're like one of those 4 or 5 NASA centers, right? So they had some internship experience there or something. But no, all of them had joined SpaceX as a fresher, basically. At least the people I met. And they said that most of the teams were like that. They were not like having too many years of experience outside. And the best part for me is the profile of the person, the educational background, and what they were doing at SpaceX really didn't match. That was very, very surprising for me. Particularly, see, I actually thought in finance is already considered like this. It's a universal acceptor, right? You can do anything and finance will still take you. You can be a physics major, you can be electrical engineer, anything it is, you can always, finance will be interested in taking you, right? And even for me, that was very strange at that time. That, okay, a guy who is completely into welding or something is suddenly actually leading a tank. Guy who has done, I think I met a guy who had done a course in some carpentry or something like that, and he was in the propulsion team. It was very strange. And it was all because of some projects they had done, which they were able to communicate well. I mean, that's what they were saying. And I saw a lot of passion in them. Everyone had so much ownership. Everyone spoke about it like my rocket. I still tell Agnikul team also like that. It is not SpaceX rocket. It's all like the word was always my first stage, my rocket, my engine. That my was coming. Everyone was speaking about it like it is literally his bike or his car or her car, right? That I think was fascinating. I somehow, I don't know how they're able to get it in so well, because they are already a very large team at that time. I think it was already 2,000 employees. And at that time, to get with that scale, to get that much passion into everyone, I think is not an easy job. So that's how I think they're cracking it. At least that is my understanding. Not really still sure what's happening.
I think that's a great example for startups to follow, because in my experience, I've always seen that in startups.
And Agnikul IIT.
A lot of unmute.
Okay.
So I've seen that in most of the startups, the way to overcome most of the issues is because of passion and ownership, and individual ownership at the employee level. I think that's what really makes a big difference. And I think SpaceX has actually probably done that extremely well because the people have not that high level of experience, but a lot of passion. And I believe basic engineering skills were there. So they were a lot of doing applied engineering. So which is very good. I had one detour question. In your background, you also say that you did an evening program at New Jersey Film School. What is that about?
Yeah, so that was my soul searching time. So because once I got into finance, I quickly realized, I think in 1 or 2 years, I realized that, that is not where I want to be spending the rest of my, professional life. And I was actually getting very jittery because it felt like I'm not sticking to anything. I did 2 years of electrical, 2 years of finance. So I started questioning myself. Am I one of these guys who will really not like take any challenge a little further? Like all these, existential questions started to come. What am I going to do with 40 years of my career and all that? So I actually literally went the brute force way and just tried to talk to as many people as I can. And I was always interested in films, right? Even now, the way I unwind is by either writing something, like trying to write some stupid screenplay or something like that. But that's how, like, it's almost my biggest, area that is my distraction away from work. So I thought I should just try what this is. And I met a lot of very, very interesting people there. Very interesting people. And completely new to the kind of people I was exposed to, because both in financial engineering in Columbia and on Wall Street, like those are all the typical kind of people I had already met, right? The backgrounds I was able to identify with. I sort of could imagine where these people are from. But in film school, I met like a completely different set of people, completely different backgrounds, what their aspirations were and all that. In fact, I don't think I've told this before in like at least in a public, like in a panel like this or a session like this. But my real conviction for aerospace actually came from one of my writing classes only, because the last assignment in my writing class, so that was like a 4-year program I was doing, and the last and writing was my favorite class actually. I loved, even now, whatever little time I get, I try to write something for myself. I don't post it much, but I write for myself. And one of the assignments was, I think the last assignment was, why do you want to choose writing as a profession? Right. And I didn't complete that assignment actually because I couldn't answer that. But anyway, the point
is
it's
like a statement of purpose. Yeah.
Exactly. It was like a statement of purpose. So, and that's when I realized, okay, then maybe it got me into thinking, what should someone do for a career? All these abstract questions, right? What do you want to do with 40 years of your life? All these things became very clear in that assignment. I never submitted the assignment and I didn't get a good grade because of that, but at least it helped me be very clear that aerospace is where I want to be. So in that sense, film school helped me. I'm also dealing with people from very diverse backgrounds. Otherwise, I would have been in this. There is this one set of people that will be in finance, and those are people, the usual kind of people I was talking to even before that. So it was like a nice, jolt in terms of, oh, okay, this kind of people also exist. You can talk to them. They also have a lot of aspirations, passion. So that is what film school did. I still actually really use tips even from there. Sometimes in Agnikul actually, because I don't know if you know this, like when they decide to actually shoot a film or even a scene, they prepare the short list.
Yeah.
Right, and the short list actually says at each shot where the camera angle is going to be, what the camera lensing is going to be, who are the people who have to be there. It's like a very nice scheduling that happens, right? There's a lot of project management involved.
Frame by frame.
Frame by frame, exactly. So I actually learned a lot of that. I think some shortlist is a nice way to actually apply for any large scale project management on a day-to-day basis, because it brings three things together. One is the core content in, say, let us say the design or something, right? The people involved, that also comes in, and the manner and the sequence in which it has to be done. So I don't call it a short list at Agnikul, but still the ideas are from there. So that cross-pollination has really helped, getting tips from finance, from the film industry and all that into aerospace. So just trying to do whatever it takes to get it. Yes.
I know what you're saying, because my son is a film director and my daughter is a film writer. So
got it.
I know what you're talking about. Awesome. Coming back to our meeting first, I think we met in 2017, I think, right?
Yes, sir, 2017.
End of 2017.
No, sir, actually May 2017, I think.
May 2017, yeah. That's when you were still in LA. You were based in LA. You had come down for a vacation.
Yeah, it was my wedding actually. I came down for my wedding.
Right.
So yeah, the story I think is you were for some reason following my wife on Twitter. Archana is her name. So you were following her on Twitter. She was a city director of Teach for India then. And she once told me, hey, you know, there is one person here. He says aerospace industry development in Tamil Nadu. Why are you not talking to him? And I am generally very poor. And even though I tried all that in LA, my networking is still very much below average. So I was so excited that I got this. So I wrote to you on Twitter. I don't know if you remember that, sir. And then that's when you told me to call you. And then I think I spoke to you once online or on a call or something like that in Jan or Feb first.
Right.
And then you connected me to CP Madhusudan, right? Yeah, exactly. And from there got connected to Professor Chakravarti here. Yeah, so that's why I keep saying, like, without you, sir, it would not have actually Agnikul would not have taken shape. So thank you for that. I'm telling this. I've told you this some 50 times. I'll again tell it. Really think that will help.
I'm glad I could be the connection link, maker. No, it's very. I mean, it's important for having been in part of many startups. I know how important it is to connect people, because people connection is what gets you opportunities, gets you business, gets you funding, gets you the kind of employees also. So I think all of that is very important in a startup. So I'm very glad it all worked out. And in fact, I remember talking to you that time. And at that time, the space industry in India was very, very unknown. Nobody knew how this is going to span out. So I should say that I was a little skeptical about how fast you can go. I'm not skeptical about your passion, but whether you can go fast because of the limitations that might be there in the space sector. But I'm really glad that the space sector opened up within a couple of years. And yes, can you talk about that? I mean, the open space initiative in India, and how that's helping you and all that.
Yeah, sure, sir. So I think so we incorporated in 20. So you connected me to Madhu and Madhu to Professor Chakravarti. And from there, so once he was interested, once Prof was interested, I quit my job and came down to India for good from LA. And also by then, my friend, who's now my co-founder as well, Moin, he was also in the middle of a career transition, and so he also joined me, right? And so we started the company. It was like, because Professor was there, we had an IIT Madras connection as well, incubation, all of those usual things that happen if you have the a support of an IIT prof. That was happening. But whenever I used to go pitch to investors, there was always the question, can you launch from India? Right? And that was very scary at that time, because it was neither a yes nor a no. And actually it was the absence of no, which could be interpreted as an yes. So we spoke to the chairman then, and the chairman, right at that time, it was, I think, Dr. Kiran Kumar. Then it was Dr. Sivan. Both of them were supportive, but there was no policy. So it was like a one-off. So we knew that one launch can happen with the support of people, but can we build a business also out of it was a question. So, and then this was continuing. Luckily, we had investors like Speciale out of Chennai again, who were interested and who believed that something can come out of this. The right time the government will support it. And then COVID hit, right? And so it was even more scary actually at that time. We had raised a couple of rounds of funding. And then this in May 2020, finance minister makes this announcement, about Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? And then at the very last of it, there was one slide on space. I still won't forget. It was a complete shock. This is where I really think, a lot of my life itself has been shaped a lot by luck. I become more humble, after Atmanirbhar Bharat having space in it, because I really think it was complete, stroke of luck. But because of that, then a lot of people started taking us seriously, because there was a clear laid out directive from the government all the way that, private initiatives like this are going to be supported. We are going to have a body to actually authorize this. You're going to have a system in place and a framework in place. And that has kept going. I think after 2020 May announcement, in space was announced in July. And then I think by December or so, we already had signed an agreement with ISRO. So things definitely started accelerating after that. But that was a big positive surprise. And I think it's one of the reasons why luck is very important for any startup, and we got lucky there, definitely.
I'll tell you why it was so fast, because the space is directly under Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister made it his, I think, motivation to make sure that Atmanirbhar comes in space very quickly. I think it's wonderful that they've opened up space, because I think this is an extremely new fertile land for many companies. Those who are already in it as a supplier to ISRO, as well as new startups who are into it. Tell us a little bit about your co-founder who is not here, Moin.
Moin.
Yeah.
So Moin and I used to play cricket. That's how we got to know each other, through a common friend. We were playing cricket in Rayapeta ground here, and both of us don't actually drink liquor. I get migraine. He's for religious reasons, he doesn't. So that's how we became buddies. We were the people who used to drive people around when others were drunk. So, and he was actually aerospace engineer as well, and he was doing something in Qantas in Australia when his dad fell ill. So he had to come back here, run his family business, which was in cosmetics. It was in contract manufacturing of cosmetic bottles. And they were actually also trying out a few different, scents themselves. And he had stabilized that. It had become a profit-making entity by that time. And I was talking to him about my own story, right, from various places. So he was like, yeah, okay, let me give this a shot. He was actually very fascinated by space law. Questions like who owns space when you get into an orbit, like, because an orbit is basically a circle, an imaginary circle in space. So who owns it? How is it that people are regulating and saying, hey, you can't be in geostationary orbit up beyond certain point? It's a little bit like airspace, but at least in air you have some matter.
It's like a road that you own. So
Exactly. So all those questions used to fascinate him. That's why he joined. But what I didn't know at that time was that he's an excellent operations person, right? And very glad that he, for some reason he was passionate about it and he chose to join, me in this journey. I think he takes care of a lot of the operational part, getting the day-to-day execution done. I take care of a lot of the design part and telling the story part, basically pitching to investors. He takes care of a lot of the execution part as well. So it's been a nice complementary set of skills that we came up with. Again, a good stroke of luck there as well.
So how did you start going through this, other than Dr. Satya, who's I think now also a co-founder for you?
Yes.
So other than Dr. Satya, did you have help from any ex-ISRO people?
Yes. Professor was already connected in the ISRO networks. A lot of people knew him. He had a lot of students in various ISRO centers because he's from a. So he connected us to Mr. R.V. Perumal, and Perumal sir was actually in Chennai itself. He's considered the father of India's GSLV rocket, actually. So we pitched our idea to him, and it was a very basic model at that time. Nothing was figured out. It was mostly a bunch of slides. That's it. So, but he was actually super encouraging, and he said, "Yeah, you should go do this. It's a small rocket. We can get it done." So that laid out the framework, because he had already built rockets, and that too, like a PSLV or a GSLV, which is like 10x the scale of what we are doing, or literally 20x the scale of what we're doing. This probably would have felt like a really small, easy goal for him, and because he was like, "Yeah, go ahead."
Miniaturization of what he did earlier.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah.
So how many stages is your planned rocket that can launch 100 kg of satellites?
Two stages.
Two stages. Okay, and what kind of fuel?
Kerosene and oxygen. So in fact, the ISRO joke is finally you're burning a kerosene stove only to go to space. That's the joke. But yes, it's kerosene burning and oxygen.
The aviation industry is running on kerosene, so it's not a problem.
Actually, if you go to the engine test stand after engine firing, it'll actually really feel like, sometimes at house when you cook with kerosene stuff, that smell is there, right? Very similar smell will be there, actually. I was actually very surprised with that. The connect immediately when I went there after our first proper firing, I said, oh, this feels like sometimes gas is not there at house, they'll do with kerosene stuff, the cooking. The same smell was actually coming. Like, okay, fine.
So what were some of the initial hiccups that you had, and how did you solve them? And I don't want this to be a technical session, but to some extent, so that you give a highlight to the people who are listening.
Sure, sir. I think basically in three categories, right? One thing is in terms of hiring and motivating a team. That's been, because at that time, a lot of people used to ask, first of all, we didn't have money. So I didn't know what to tell them to say, okay, will I be having a job after 1 year? Right. So we were only able to attract people who were like really thinking also about only 1 year. As long as it's on my resume, some rocket startup, I'm good. Those are the people who came first because it's easy to convince them. And they're also only looking at that level, right? But then once the momentum started to build, it was a time to actually convert those people to believing in Agnikul. That was actually very hard. Not at like I'm not at all. I mean, in the sense, completely new experience for me. I was not like in any position till then to actually convince people to change their careers. And I myself was like changing careers left, right, center. So, I was not very good at that. But because there is a certain thing cool about space that automatically started to work in our favor. Smaller milestones, funding coming in, the government announcement, all these events. The
So
second,
how many pitches did you make before you got the first investment?
would be around 600 to 700, somewhere in that range for sure.
Okay, I thought so. Okay.
That kind of.
I remember my experience. Yeah. Okay.
So the second thing was exactly the point you're talking about, raising money, right? So in a country where the laws were not very clear at that time, and in a country where a lot of the startup money was going into consumer tech, right, or consumer software, how do you go and sell a rocket to investors? So that was very challenging. Again, very lucky. It actually happened through an IIT event. IIT Madras incubation cell had actually was having a Chennai event. And in that, I had the chance to pitch to Vishesh from Special. There was a fund out of Chennai, right? And for some reason, he actually had the background in space and he had a view on this sector actually having a future. So that's how it clicked. And from there, once you got in, slowly things started to build momentum. But that's how that happened. But that was very hard. Because 500, 600 times people telling you that, yeah, it's great, but this is not exactly, you should go. At least 50, 60 people have told me I should go back to the US again, that, this won't work out here. So that part was a little hard to take. And the last part was just working with hardware was also not very, easy. Because you have to align on a lot of areas and getting a team to align on that is always hard. Because people are working on different versions of the development. Hardware is always like if there's electrical component and a mechanical component that have to come together. This is at a different stage, that's at a different stage. They would have interfaced properly at some stage, but after that, as they grow, they may not interface with each other. So putting those processes in place to make hardware work, that was a very difficult challenge. Every day there is a new process and then probably a process to maintain that process and then a process to maintain the process to maintain the process. It was becoming like that. So that part I'm still figuring out. Still very much a learner there because it's not easy to get people aligned single-handedly in one goal. Even if they're mentally and emotionally aligned, in terms of design, I'm saying it's a little challenge. But ISRO has done a great job there. So trying to learn as much as possible from ISRO. I think that is one of the good things of doing it from India. ISRO has been there, done that. This is actually a baby rocket for them. I don't even think it's a big deal for ISRO. So working with vendors who have done that for ISRO, working with people who have built it for ISRO, those things are actually really making a difference.
Is it likely that the ISRO will enter your space of making small rockets?
Their smallest thing, I think, is actually still too big for what we are doing. The SSLV, right? It's at least at the 300 to 500 kg range. That's the small satellite launch vehicle. We are doing something that will be around 100 kgs or so. So we have still believed that this is going to be like a complement to the fleet of vehicles in India. So, and that we've been very careful to, not actually either make it feel like they're stepping on ISRO's toes, or second, even from a customer standpoint, go and target the same class, right? Like imagine if someone here is a customer, they want to launch a satellite and that overlaps with what ISRO provides. Why will anyone come to me? We have a giant already who has been so successful in rockets. Doesn't even make sense. We should fill a gap in the market, and the gap was in the very low end of the mass spectrum. So that's where we are. And I don't think ISRO will even come there. ISRO is looking at larger missions, going to the sun, going to Mars, going to the moon. And we are looking at the smallest rocket possible to low Earth orbit. So
what is the orbit that you're looking at? What's that?
It's a class of orbits called low Earth orbits. They will be around anywhere between, say, 350 to 400 kilometers to, like, say, 700, 800 kilometers. That band of, altitudes. I always tell myself it's basically Chennai to Bangalore, but in the upward direction. That kind of distance above. That's basically where the rocket has to go.
And your rocket will be able to launch multiple satellites in a single.
Yes, sir. Yes, very much. Even though that is that option is there, we have restart capability as they call it. So basically, a rocket is a truck. It's like an Amazon truck. It's just going upward. That's all. So we have the ability to do some restarts in the second stage. So you can push out different things, different parcels at different places. So that's how we have built it. But the core innovation we are trying to bring is to say it will be dedicated. It should almost be like basically sending something to space should be like buying a laptop. So if all of us in this gathering here want to buy laptops, and we've all for some reason decided it's Dell laptops that we want to buy, right? We'll all go choose, different people will choose RAM size, different monitor size, different hard disk size. But it's fundamentally the core architecture is still the same. That is the base. Instead of saying, hey, this is one laptop, no go, everyone can just use this configuration. That's the experience you want to bring to the customer. Choose where you want to launch from, choose where you want to go, choose how much you're sending there, and we will fine-tune the rocket to exactly suit your needs. So in that sense, it's like a taxi ride to space as opposed to taking a bus to space. That's sort of a model that we're trying to bring.
Each launch will be for a specific customer?
It can be for a specific customer, yes. It's almost like if you have 30 kgs, you're good to go. We are profitable, we can go and launch it.
Isn't that more expensive than like a Ola, Uber kind of a model where you have multiple passengers for the same ride?
Not very much actually, sir. It's definitely higher. You can't go and say that you're almost to the same level as a much larger player doing ride share, but it is actually not very different. It's not like a bus ticket versus a cab ride. It's not that different. It's about like say 20% costlier, but more importantly, time wise, it's almost 40 times faster. In the sense, today the waiting time to do a ride share to space is like 40 weeks, 50 weeks, maybe more than that, 75 weeks, and we are saying we'll do it in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So 2 weeks. So that is actually going to be a big saving in opportunity cost, and that's something we are trying to
So who are the kind of customers you are likely to have? Who will be the customers?
Customers would be anyone who is wanting to build a satellite or wants to put a satellite in space. Today, people go to space for two things majorly. One, taking photos. You can call it remote sensing, Earth observation. Or people who want to communicate, right? So bouncing off signals between 2 points on the planet. So those are the mega customers still. But a lot of new applications are coming in actually. That is actually the more exciting part. I recently read about a company that is trying to store data in space because the latency has come down so much, right? It's such low latency system. And cooling is available practically for free. You need to do some station keeping to stay away from the sun. But cooling is available for free. The other side of, if you're not facing the sun, you're at, I think, 4 or 5 Kelvin. That's like the ambient temperature of space. Imagine running, entire servers there, right? Instead of actually doing it on the ground where cooling is the biggest cost. So all these new ideas are also coming.
Maybe we can see a crypto farm there soon.
Exactly. At least energy is cooling. Energy is there.
Yeah, because they require a lot of cooling energy. So
exactly.
Okay. Having talked about where you are right now, what does the future look like? Because I think we are almost coming to the end of our session. So what does the future look like?
Thankfully looking good so far, trying to get the first launch out this year. So that way 2022 should be a good year for us, hopefully. A lot of things have to still work, but there is also this pride that, this is the 75th year of Indian independence. For some reason, we are all here in India trying to get this to happen. So trying to see if we can, make that one more thing for India also, and obviously for Agnikul also, to say that, okay, by the 75th year of independence, we have a private launch happening out of India. So that is what is the very, very immediate goal. But then after that, it's about, like Professor keeps telling me, you're not building one rocket, you're building a rocket company, right? Because I sometimes get a little short-sighted in my thinking, because I start, instead of growing the company, I start growing the rocket, he says. Very valid feedback. So that's about it. So getting to a point of 25 launches a year. And basically, it should be like, it should become like, if someone wants to actually send a rocket to us, a small satellite to space for someone's birthday, they should be able to do that. Of course, they should be able to deorbit it as well without adding to the space debris problem and all that. But the point is, it should be that reachable. Space should become like just another destination to go to, both for sending things or for sending people. And that is in the long-term plan.
Okay. I think one of the things that what you talked about Moin asking you all the questions about who owns that orbit and how do you control, what is the legality and all those issues. I think a lot of that is yet to be sorted out, because as more and more private players come in, I think it's going to be like on the road traffic. How do you regulate the traffic on the road? How do you make sure that there's no accidents? How do you make sure that everybody has the same right of way and all that? So I think there's a lot of things that needs to be probably sorted out. I think what SpaceX is doing in the US and startups like yourself and a few others in India who are doing it, I think it's a wonderful thing that I'm very happy to see such a good progress in actually a short time. Even software companies take 5 to 10 years before they can actually show some good progress. And it's really nice to see a hardware company. I would call you a hardware company, even though you have a lot of software built in, because at the end of the day, what you build is rockets. And that with in a very, very new sector, which is space, thankfully to the Prime Minister for his vision and to the ISRO community for supporting that vision wholeheartedly. So that I think this is a great opportunity for young engineers to get attracted to space. In fact, when I was at Boeing, we used to interview a lot of people and everybody would come and say, I want to build an aircraft, design an aircraft. We said, there are only 3,000 engineers in the whole world who know how to design an aircraft, okay? And you're going to be one of the 30 million people, engineers working in the aviation industry. You will do your part, okay? But I think people need to understand that every bit actually is very helpful to get to the final objective. And I think I would like to see Agnikul as the SpaceX of India. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Hope you get more funding so that you can do bigger things faster. Again, wishing you all the very best. I have 2 questions from the audience. And I'm also encouraging others to put in your questions in the chat box if you have any. The first one is from Mr. Shivkumar Swami from ALT Bearings, ALT Bearings. He says, I'm an alumnus of IIT of 93 and a director in French Technology Innovation Company in the bearing space. My question, how do you, IIT and Agnikul, plan to leverage technology to leapfrog any competition?
Yes, so by doing fundamentally different engineering as opposed to what others are doing, I think that's the best way to beat competition. So that's where we use things like 3D printing to make our entire rocket engine is 100% 3D printed, meaning every single part of the rocket is 3D printed, and that too is printed in one shot. What comes out of the printer is a full engine. So technologies like that is how I think we stay ahead of the competition, by constantly innovating and by constantly pushing the boundaries of what engineering can do. All of the physics has already been figured out. I think since 1950s, we have been going to space as a species. 1969, we've gone to another, celestial body itself. So the real innovation is in engineering, using newer and newer techniques, using newer, electronics, using newer software to actually make things more efficient, more importantly, more cheaper. I think that is a big barrier, and that's what we are trying to do to innovate.
And tell us a little bit about this 3D printing. I mean, how many parts were there before you actually adopted 3D printing as a technology? And how many, I'm sure 3D printing only gives you one part, correct? So how many parts combined into one?
It's actually some 3,000 odd parts combined into one part. So that's amazing. So when you actually look at a complete rocket engine that's conventionally made, so many small parts are fabricated and then welded at each point carefully. Like there are cooling channels around the engine that have to be actually continuously, having kerosene and all the fuel in them to cool down the combustion chamber itself. So what the team here came up with is a very interesting design wherein that entire piece can be 3D printed. So for us, it's just one component, that's it. So that was a huge saving in terms of time, in terms of defects also, I think is very, very low. And it's a very repeatable process, right? So I would say that by making it a single piece engine, we have unintentionally automated the process of engine making. Basically, you put it in the 3D printer, what comes out is a full engine. So that I think is what the team has accomplished here. So I think those are the kind of innovations that will be helping.
I mean, I'm really fascinated by that because 3D printing itself is new. Okay. And then on top of that, you're trying to put that into a in the space sector, which is also a kind of unknown for a lot of people. So how did that thing come about? Who was the specialist who was able to do this for you?
So I think what we were doing is learning again by going to different vendors, and so two things are happening. One is there was some 3D printed research happening in the center we worked out of. This is the combustion R&D center. So there were some projects going on there. So there was a little bit of confidence in the fact that you can 3D print combustors, stuff where systems where stuff burns, right? Then that confidence was there. That the real knowledge actually came from people who are actually going to multiple vendors, doing literally hundreds of iterations of parts. I think the final engine that worked was after like easily 200 iterations of different combinations of different subsystems. Okay. So it was very much brute force, I would say, in some sense. Brute force, but then at every time you're optimizing and getting to one better design. And so that's how we got there. Done by people who learned additive manufacturing in NCCRD only. Nothing like, we were not like AM specialists or something like that. Just learned it on the job, and I still feel like that's the best way to get ahead, at least in a
startup. Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing like failing and learning. So, one other question is, somebody lacking, how can I become part of your company? He says he's a second-year computer science student. He wants to be part of software group. Can you share the email ID for where to apply?
Sure. It's humancapital@agnicool.in. If you can send your resume there, happy to look at it. All branches of engineering, there is some role here. In fact, I remember your advice actually. First hire the person, if everything is right, then figure out what you will give him. You told me that, and I actually still follow it in many places. So anyone is welcome, literally. I think that's something very important. So much is there to be done, and in every stream of engineering, there's something to be done. So if you're good at your basics and you want to do something for the space ecosystem here, definitely you will crack it in something. So please do apply. Yeah, definitely. humancapital@agnicool.in. It's also on the website. The email ID is also on the website.
I think that concept of hire the person and then find the role is also followed by SpaceX. I'm sure that's why they got all those completely different kind of people. So
yes.
One student is saying he's a student from Erode. What type of cooling is used in engineering? How do you manage it?
Without getting too technical, it's regenerative cooling. So basically, you allow the fuel to flow around the engine before it enters the engine. It's a very standard technique in rocket engines, figured out way back in the 60s. It's a very, very smart way to cool, because you're all in aerospace, you're always constrained for mass, right? There is no mass capacity anywhere. So you can't take a coolant with you. So the only thing you have is what you have to use that itself to cool. So someone figured that instead of putting the fuel within the engine directly, you run it along the sides of the engine and then put it in. And that cools your system. So that's the same concept that we're using. We have just engineered it in a way where that can be 3D.
Very good. There's a person by name Aragu Pandya Raja, City Innovation Officer with Chennai Smart City Limited. He's asking, what is the larger picture for Agnicool has other than making space travel cheap?
Other than making space travel cheap, it's actually really about making rocket science not be that bigger deal, because I think space has to become a platform where others can also do a lot of things. Right now, space is already considered either like from a entertainment standpoint or whatever, it's only for the rich, or from a engineering standpoint, it's only for people who are like super. All we are trying to do is make it so accessible that that it actually becomes like a platform where a lot of people can do different things. Students can do experiments, recreation can happen, entertainment can happen, multiple other use cases, manufacturing can happen. Space manufacturing is actually really picking up. People they don't want to go and make a satellite here and put it in space. You go put a 3D printer there and take the raw material alone from here and actually do the part itself in space. And I think in some cases it's actually easier. So there you can see that it's just becoming another location. It's becoming a platform where a lot of things can be done. So just want to do our role to make that, a reality.
It's happening in the space station, right? The current space station, they're doing
They
that right now.
tested a few techniques there. So
Yeah.
there are a couple of startups which are actually doing, literally the whole concept is manufacturing in space.
Correct. Correct. So another person is asking, I would like to know if you have used porous structure in the engineering, in the engine. Yeah.
Porous. No, nothing is porous because it's actually very, it has to take a lot of pressure. So it's actually not porous. It has
Can't
to
be
withstand.
porous. Yeah. Can't be porous. Correct. Okay. How much does having knowledge about several disciplines of astronautics help as compared to being pinpointed with one discipline in your industry?
It actually helps me context switch a lot. Actually, I'm able to, for me, I just feel like I've learned a lot from all of these other fields. So, and particularly being an entrepreneur, you should be able to have answers to every question that comes your way. So, or at least have a view on that. So that actually is very helpful. It opened up my thinking a lot. Actually, that is where, and as I told you, the tips that I've used, right? The rules of thumb from finance, this ability to do project management from films, all of those things I think I'm picking up because of this experience in various sectors. So been very lucky to actually have all of those opportunities as well. So you're trying to use all of that here to get this rocket launched.
Somebody is asking, I would like to know what you look in a candidate while recruiting for aerodynamics engineer post. He says he's completed BE mechanical in 2020.
We look for passion more than passion and understanding of basics. That's it. As we already said, role is okay. We'll figure out. Maybe you want to do aerodynamics, but once you come in, you will like something else. That and all is totally fine anyway. As long as you're strong in the basics and you really, really want to get the rocket launched, everything else is okay. We can work with it.
There's one question from another person called Vamsi Krishna. He's saying, will gravitational force come into picture if you build in space using 3D printer?
Yeah, you have to create some mild gravity, some mild force to keep the material bounded in the bottom. I'm not directly researched on that, but I know that they try to create a small acceleration that keeps everything in one direction. But it's not like the acceleration to the gravity of Earth, like you don't need to go to 9.8 meter per second square or something mild to just keep things pushed a little on one side. So it's actually very easy to achieve. That's what I've read. I'm not directly sure of the technology.
Another question from Mr. Gunashekar. Are there any moving parts? What is the material for 3D printing? You would be needing energy for the launched entity. Do you use solar PV cells?
Moving parts, no. No real moving parts. Any rocket engine, actually, not ours. Any rocket engine has no moving parts. It's simply it's a very well-designed shape to have a lot of energy produced and be pushed out in a way so that you get force in the other direction. What is the material we use? Yeah, we use Inconel. We use Inconel for 3D printing our engines. Not looked at solar cells or anything so far for launching. There are some batteries in the vehicle, and the rest of it is the rocket, fuel combustion energy itself. So that's what we have been using.
Another question from Dinesh Kumar. How rocket engine manufacturing company like yours expand its launch frequency?
So launch frequency is really about 2-3 things. One is access to a launch pad. The other thing is about being able to do it quickly, right? Just operationally being extremely efficient. So for both, I think we have tried to come up with processes where like our launch pad is completely mobile. We don't want to be stuck to one launch pad. In some sense, that is a inspiration from the missile world. Even though we are a complete commercial space company, if you look at missiles, all of them are launched from anywhere, right? For strategic reason, it has to be that way. And because our vehicle is small enough, we are trying to use that tech into our vehicle design. So that's why we want to be able to have access to as many launch pads as possible in the country. So that is one way to increase launch frequency. The other thing is to keep everything as a plug and play model. It should be as nimble as possible, nothing too complex. It should be easy to remove engines, put back engines. The flight computer and the engine computer should connect like just, another USB cable or another port on an Ethernet network. Those are the innovations that we are bringing in to enable very quick assembly. And so that's why we think, right now we can't do it in 2 weeks, but I think over a period of time, we can get to that point. At least that's what we are striving to get.
So yours is an expendable rocket, right? So that means you can't reuse it.
No.
So
We
it's like a
can't.
missile. Once fired, it's gone.
Yeah, it is liquid propulsion based, so it
Yeah.
could be reused. Right now, we are not attempting it, but the technology is possible. Right now, we are not investing time into actually bringing it back, but we will at some point. It's definitely in the growth strategy of the company.
Okay. Somebody's asking, how do you carry out static test fires for your engines? Like what kind of test stands do you use?
Oh, we built our own test stands here. So I mean, it's very standard. Everything is very sort of containers for us, because we always believe in being in one place and probably moving to another place at some point when we get a larger facility. So everything is based out of containers, but it's a very normal structure. Otherwise, it should be able to take about 2 to 3x the force of the engine that's getting produced. Yeah, other than that, nothing special. Again, these things are already there in the industry. We're just trying to do it in a faster and cheaper way. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Gunashekar has a follow-on question. He's saying, I meant energy for the entity positioned in space, energy from battery only. I think he's talking about satellites,
Yeah.
not the rocket.
Yes. So we are not into satellites, so not directly focused on that right now. For us, the entire story itself is only 10 minutes. 3 minutes for the first stage, 7 minutes for the second stage, and that's it. We go there, put it in space, and after that, it's over. And for that, all of the energy is there in the fuel itself. So nothing on this area.
See, I had a question for you, which is, if you look at SpaceX or if you look at NASA or if you look at ISRO, they all have specific location from where they launch. They can't launch from anywhere else. That is because of the geolocation that's required to take it to that kind of orbit. But you're saying that you can launch from anywhere. So why is it so different? Is it because of the orbit?
No, it's actually because of the size, actually. To be honest, it's a small vehicle. So we try to. So one thing is size makes it mobile. You can take it from place to place.
Correct.
We brought in all of the engineering that the missile folks do, because all missiles are mobile, or at least many of them are. So because the rocket's mass is in that class of the missile, like a Agni missile or something. Okay, so that engineering also already exists in India. So we are like trying to take lessons from that and bring it into commercial space, because still no commercial space has always been about really large rockets, and those need a fixed infrastructure. We are trying to go to a small space, and their missiles have done it really well. So just trying to be doing that.
Okay. Follow-on question from Mr. Shiv Swami, Vault Bearings. He's saying, launch pads, are you also trying to get into this space, as it seems to be a good business case?
Not yet, sir. Again, maybe in the future. Right now, launch pads, we're looking at ISRO's launch pads. It is definitely a good business case. A lot of people are building rockets. Very little people are building launch pads. So it's almost like everyone is building planes. No one is building airports. So it's definitely a good business case. Right now, it's all done by the government in India. Happy to do it with that. We'll see. Very interestingly, the new space transportation policies draft that came out last year actually had a very clear mandate on what to do to get approval from the government to operate a private launch pad.
Oh.
I was actually very, very positively surprised by that. I didn't imagine that a space transportation policy would cover building private launch pads in India. Wow. But there is a policy now. I don't think it has passed the final. It has not like come out as a bill, but it has actually been drafted and people have put comments on it and all that. It's sitting in the assembly now. So
that's a great startup idea if somebody wants to do it. So
yes.
Very good. I think we have exhausted all the questions, and we are also almost like 1 hour from the start. Let's see, one final question. Curious to know what kind of connection all the private company founders in the space tech domain have among each other. What kind of conversations do you have when you get to meet, or if you help each other when needed? I don't know whether you get to meet each other, but
yeah,
not with COVID. So.
COVID. Yeah. But it's a very small community. All of us are on like one WhatsApp group. I mean, it's a very, very small community, particularly in India. There are like 50 people. That's it, 50, 60 people.
Right.
So, yeah, we know, all of us know each other. At least, I mean, I don't know if we are like very good friends, but at least we all know each other to say hello and help each other out if there is a problem. And all of us are, have been through that struggle. So there is just that attachment of, okay, he's also struggled the same way as I have. So that empathy is always there. Yeah, it's interesting time to be doing space tech entrepreneurship in India. But it's really the best time. So that's my I think the last question, so just that my leaving thought is actually that if someone wants to do space tech startups in India, now is the time. The government is forthcoming, money is flowing in, and there's very clear business cases outside the country, which you can easily use to convince even people here. And Indian space tech has tremendous respect outside. I was not even from the space community, but just because I said I am from India and I'm studying space, people were actually listening to me when I was in US. And I used to find it funny because I knew nothing about it. Even now, I don't know how much I know. At that time, I knew nothing. And still, just because I was from India, people used to listen. So, and I feel that respect ISRO has already is commanding. We should just totally capitalize on that and go to the next level.
Excellent. I think there's been a wonderful session. Thank you very much. And I think we had close to 45, 50 people at one point, even though some have dropped out now. I think it was a wonderful exchange of information with you, Srinath. Great to meet you virtually again. So
yeah, likewise, sir.
Wishing you all the very best. I will come and see one of your test fire soon.
Yeah, please come. Please come. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening.